Hey, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to start off by saying all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakakwadash, and double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Today we'll be moving forward with Daniel chapter 11, but we'll be covering verses 22 through 24. Quick recap on verses 21 and 21. 20 and 21. In Daniel 11, verse 21, then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom. Right? And now this is talking about the estate of Antiochus III the Great. A raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom shall stand up, which was Seleucus IV, Philopator, his son. But within a few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger nor in battle, which is going into his death, and how he was assassinated by one of his treasurers, Heliodorus. Verse 21, and in his estate shall stand up a vile person. Right? So after the death of Seleucus IV, a vile person shall stand up, which was his brother, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom. Right? And they didn't give him the honor of the kingdom because he wasn't the rightful heir. The rightful heir was Seleucus' son, Demetrius I Soter. But he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Right? And this is going into how, with the help of Eumenes II, Antiochus was able to come into Syria, oust Heliodorus and take the kingdom for himself, right? But even though it says what? And obtain the kingdom by flatteries, it's going into like the treaties he made, the things he did, and the stuff he would say in order to pretty much get the people on his side and to get them to accept him as their king, even though he wasn't the rightful heir. So now in the verse 22, and with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown from before him, and shall be broken, also the prince of the covenant. Now it says, and with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown from before him. And this is going into the armies that Antiochus used to conquer his enemies, or those he desired to conquer, in which you had us, Israel, Heliodorus, when he ousted him, and Ptolemy VI. These were part of those that were overcome and broken before Antiochus IV. And shall be broken, also the prince of the covenant. And the prince of the covenant was Onias III, who was the high priest at the time. But when Antiochus came into power, he pretty much gave the high priest position to the brother of Onias, Jason. And that's what we read about in 2 Maccabees chapter 4. But it was also during this time that Onias was killed. Now, when we look into the Prince of the Covenant, right? Of the covenant first. A covenant, alliance, a pledge, Slakia. Bariath, a covenant, alliance, a pledge, jumping down to the point, between the Most High and man. A covenant, divine ordinance with signs or pledges. Right, because, the Lord, he had made that covenant with Israel. And we can get that real quick. Exodus chapter 2, verse 24. And the Most High heard their groaning, and the Most High remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So, we know that the Most High, he made a covenant with Israel. But now going back, looking into Prince, Nagayad, it says a leader, ruler, a captain, a prince, a ruler, prince, a prince, overseer. And that's right, because the high priest, what the high priest was the overseer of the covenant. He had to make sure that we were upholding our end of the covenant and doing the things we were supposed to be doing pertaining to that covenant with the Most High. But when Antiochus IV came to power, he removed Onias from that position and set up Jason. And Jason wasn't moving in the ways of how a high priest should. He was supposed to make sure that we were obeying the laws and things of that nature, but he was turning us away from the laws, and pushing the laws of the heathen, which we're going to read about later on. But verse 23, and after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. So it says, and after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully. And, Antiochus, he worked deceitfully after many, many leagues that were made with him, because that was, his nature. But you had a league made with him by Jason, so that Jason could become high priest. But what? After that league, he worked deceitfully, and he did so because he ends up removing Jason and setting up Menelaus as the high priest. And he also made a league with Ptolemy the Sixth Philometor, which he ended up working deceitfully after. Continuing, for he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. Right, because when Antiochus IV first came to Syria, he had that small army, but for the sake of prophecy, even though that Antiochus, the fourth Epiphanes was obviously wicked, the Lord was behind him and made it to where he became, a strong and great power. But he only did that for, the sake of his prophecy to play out how he wanted it to, how he willed it to. Okay, so now let's get the book of 2nd Maccabees and read about the things that Jason did and how Antiochus dealt deceitfully. 2nd Maccabees chapter 4, jump to verse 7. But after the death of Seleucus, when Antiochus, called Epiphanes, took the kingdom, Jason, the brother of Onias, labored underhand to be high priest, in which Onias was the current high priest, promising unto the king by intercession 360 talents of silver, and of another revenue 80 talents. So here, we basically see that Jason is making that league with Antiochus, pretty much saying that he would give him this money if he made him the high priest. Beside this, he promised to assign 150 more, if he might have license to set him up a place for exercise and for the training up of youth in the fashions of the heathen, and to write them of Jerusalem by the name of Antiochians, which when the king had granted, and he had gotten into his hand the rule, he forthwith brought his own nation to Greekish fashion. So here it is, as the high priest, you're supposed to be making sure that we're following the laws of the covenant. But Jason, this is what he did. He was pretty much doing the opposite. But now let's jump down to verse 21. As time has passes, now when Apollonius, the son of Menestheus, was sent into Egypt for the coronation of King Ptolemaeus Philometor, Antiochus, understanding him not to be well affected to his affairs, provided for his own safety, whereupon he came to Joppa, and from thence to Jerusalem, where he was honorably received of Jason and of the city, and was brought in with torchlight and with great shoutings, and so afterward went with his host unto Phenice. 3 years afterward, Jason sent Menelaus, the aforesaid Simon's brother, to bear the money unto the king, and to put him in the mind of certain necessary matters. But he brought to the presence of the king, when he had magnified him for the glorious appearance of his power, got the priesthood to himself, offering more than Jason by 300 talents of silver. So he came with the king's mandate, bringing nothing worthy the high priesthood, but having the fury of a cruel tyrant and the rage of a savage beast. Then Jason, who had undermined his own brother, being undermined by another, was compelled to flee into the country of the Ammonites. So Menelaus got the principality, but as for the money that he had promised unto the king, he took no good order for it, albeit Sostratus, the ruler of the castle, required it. So here we see that Antiochus dealt deceitfully with Jason by, first making the deal with Jason, but then he goes on to undermine him because he pretty much, turns around and made that same deal with Menelaus, where he removed Jason from that position and gave it to Menelaus. But this Like we said, this was Antiochus's nature, so this wasn't the only time where he, made that deal or a league with someone and then dealt deceitfully afterwards. But now let's transfer over to First Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 10. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been in hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, Let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we had much sorrow. So this device pleased them well. Then certain of the people were so forward herein, that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem, according to the customs of the heathen. So doesn't this sound like what we just read? And that's because this is Jason who was leading those wicked Israelites. And as we read in 2 Maccabees, what did Jason do? Give verse 9. Beside this, he promised to assign 150 more, if he might have license to set him up a place for exercise and for the training up of the youth in the fashions of the heathen, and to write them of Jerusalem by the name of Antiochians, which when the king had granted and he had gotten into his hand the rule, he forthwith brought his own nation to Greekish fashion. And the royal privileges granted of special favor to the Jews by the means of John the father of Eupolemus, who went ambassador to Rome for amity and aid, he took away. And putting down the governments which were according to the law, he brought up new customs against the law. For he built gladly a place of exercise under the tower itself, and brought the chief young men under his subjection, and made them wear a hat. Now such was the height of Greek fashions, and increase of heathenish manners, through the exceeding profaneness of Jason, that ungodly wretch, and no high priest. So, this is what Jason pushed. He pushed Israel to the laws of the heathen and influenced them, basically influenced Jake to follow after the ways of the heathen, which is the opposite of what a high priest should be doing. So back in First Maccabees, it refers to them as what? Those wicked men of Israel. But it's talking about the same account as here in Second Maccabees. It's just that Second Maccabees goes more into detail, and that's pretty much how First Maccabees and the book of First Maccabees and the book of Second Maccabees are linked. They talk about the same events, just one in more detail than the other. So now back to Daniel 11, moving on to verse 24. He shall enter peaceably, even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey and spoil and riches, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time. Now it says he shall enter peaceably, even upon the fattest places of the province, in which these places, these were places like Jerusalem, Tyre, and Judea, among others, but these places were referred to as the fattest, dealing with the riches of these lands. But it says he shall enter peaceably, right? And Antiochus, he was able to come into these places with ease, because remember what? He had taken us over, as we read in verse 22. And with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown before him. So with his armies, he pretty much conquered us and conquered those areas. So he had easy access to these areas. And he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. Now, dealing with Israel, what Antiochus IV did that his fathers didn't was to heavily interfere with our worship of the Lord. Because dealing with Antiochus Epiphanes, his forefathers, those previous Seleucid kings, even though we were subject under their rule, they allowed us some independence. And by that, I mean, like, when it came to us following our laws and worshiping our power, they didn't interfere like this Antiochus did. And what he did, for example, he pretty much made the us following our laws illegal. First Maccabees chapter 1, jump down to verse 41. Moreover, King Antiochus, Antiochus Epiphanes, wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and every one should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Yeah, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath. For the king had sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah that they should follow the strange laws of the land, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days, and pollute the sanctuary and the holy people, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts. So, the things that we were supposed to be doing according to the laws of our forefathers and the covenant with the Most High, he made that illegal. And that's how he heavily interfered with our worship of, the Lord, which his forefathers didn't do. But something he also did that his forefathers didn't do was, he used divine epithets or, divine titles, for himself because he was full of so much pride. He magnified himself as a god, so he referred to himself as, a god. Here, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, here, divine epithets. Antiochus was the first Seleucid king to use divine epithets on coins, perhaps inspired by the Bactrian Hellenistic kings who had earlier done so, or else building on the ruler code that his father Antiochus the Great had codified within the Seleucid Empire. These epithets included manifest God, and after his defeat of Egypt, bringer of victory. So, he was, then that just goes to show how full of pride he was. He was very prideful. Okay, finishing up with verse 24. He shall scatter among them the prey and spoil and riches, in which, he did when he attacked Jerusalem, but also going into scatter. He shall scatter Bazayar, I think, to scatter, disperse, right. And when Antiochus would go into an area with his armies, he would disperse the prey. He would disperse the spoil that they gathered from the temples or wherever, and he would disperse the riches, between his armies and maybe his family or his friends. Like, he would just give things away. But that also ties back to the pride he had. But there's an example of this that we can read where him doing this actually did not work to his benefit. First Maccabees chapter 3. Start at verse 25. Then began the fear of Judas and his brethren, and an exceeding great dread, to fall upon the nations round about them, and so much as his fame came unto the king, and all nations talked of the battles of Judas. Now when King Antiochus heard these things, Antiochus IV, he was full of indignation, wherefore he sent and gathered together all the forces of his realm, even a very strong army. He opened also his treasure, and gave his soldiers pay for a year, commanding them to be ready whensoever he should need them. Nevertheless, when he saw that the money of his treasures failed, and that the tributes in the country were small, because of the dissension and plague which he had brought upon the land, and taken away the laws which had been of old time, he feared that he should not be able to bear the charges any longer, nor to have such gifts to give so liberally as he did before, right? Because, he just used to be passing things out. For he had abounded above the kings that were before him. Right, so here is an example of how, he would pretty much disperse the spray, the prey, the spoil, and the riches. But in this example, it didn't work to help him. He shall scatter among them the prey and spoil and riches. Yeah, and he shall forecast his devices against strongholds, even for a time. And, this is going into his plans and actions that he took against not only Israel and the strongholds under his jurisdiction, but as well as Egypt, which he planned to go conquer. That we read here in First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 16. Now, when the kingdom was established before Antiochus, he thought to reign over Egypt, that he might have the dominion of 2 realms. Right, so that's why he forecasted those devices against Egypt. That's why he planned, what he did against Egypt, because he wanted to rule over that as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So one more read through. Verse 22, and with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown before him, and shall be broken, also the prince of the covenant. So it's going into how, Antiochus pretty much conquered who he conquered with his armies, and shall be broken, in which, he conquered us as well. We were broken before him. Also the prince of the covenant, and that prince of the covenant being the high priest Onias, who actually ends up being killed during the time of Antiochus IV's reign as king, even though it wasn't directly by him. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, going into how, he would pretty much dishonor that deal that he made with someone. And we gave an example of that with how he gave Jason the high priest spot, but then he gave it to Menelaus. For he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people, right? Because, when he first came there, he had a small army. It was only with the help of Eumenes II that he was able to oust Heliodorus. But, the Lord had it to where he became such a strong and great power for the sake of his prophecy to play out. He shall enter peaceably, even upon the fattest places of the province, right? Going to places like, Jerusalem, etc. And, and these were the richest places. And he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers, like we said, going into how not only did he use those divine epithets, but how he interfered with our worshiping of the Lord, Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushai. He shall scatter among them the prey and spoil and riches, right? In which, he used to, divide, disperse, the prey and the spoil and riches between his armies and, just people, maybe his friends, maybe his family. He just disperse things. And he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time, going into the plans and the actions that he took against certain places like Israel and Egypt. Right, so with that being said, once more I would like to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, B'Hashem, Yahushai, B'Hashem, Rakakwadash, and double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, and Shalom.